Pokémon. Not just one of, but in fact the most beloved IP worldwide. So much so, even 40-year-old men are drop-kicking children just to get their hands on a couple of packs filled with shiny paper. For reasons we may never know. But that's not all. It's a franchise that has expanded in every form of media. From Saturday morning cartoons, card games, movies, and most importantly, video games. It's a franchise that everyone recognizes, being extremely influential, whether intentional or not. But with recent titles facing criticism instead of unwavering praise, unlike those of previous, it comes as no surprise that a number of people who grew up on these games would look for something else to help scratch that Pokémon itch. Which is why we have seen so many bootleg mods and clones surrounding and infesting other games. But then there come games that aren't treated as clones, but seemingly use what Pokémon players have wanted and transform them into their own game. Like how many wanted or weren't satisfied by the polish and open world experience of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. And so just over a year later, Pocket Pair released Power World, which quickly gained fan recognition as it's Pokémon with guns. And it's gained extreme notoriety from that, rivaling Pokémon in sales. But then there's another one that springs to mind, and one that personally, I wish I'd played sooner. A game called Cassette Beasts. Created by Byton Studios, an independent team of 3, Tom Coxon, Jay Baylis, and Joel Baylis. It's a game filled with questions, where you mysteriously wash up on an island, strange and unfamiliar, as the creatures that inhabit it are just as unusual. You wander aimlessly till you find what seems like a city, but before we can approach, we are ambushed by a traffic cone. That's a crab. A traffic crab. And we are soon shown the ropes by an unknown woman, later introducing herself as Kaylee, and after taking us to the small civilization, explaining how everyone arrived here the same way we did, but oddly, not all from the same place, coming from different times and worlds entirely, as Kaylee mentions clothes being out of our era, and having to be aware people may not know what movies are. Oh, and she says it outright, so there's that. She later takes us out to explore the New Wirrals. New Wirrals? Wirrals? She later takes us out to explore on an errand of hers, but also as we hope to find a way home. This also serves to better prepare ourselves for what difficulties that lie ahead, learning how the battle system works, how these cassette tapes are how we record, not capture these creatures, and how recording some will give us abilities. As we do, we uncover a train station. Ominous and out of place, we enter, getting this eerie sensation as it was clearly abandoned many years ago. But as we get to the tracks, a large broken entity appears, and we are introduced to what will lead the rest of the game's main story. As the style shifts, and we are forced into an encounter with this entity, who completely outlevels us. But thankfully for us, it's already significantly hurt. By what? That's a question for later. But it allows us the opportunity to defeat it using a key mechanic called fusion, allowing us to fuse with Kaylee, forming a stronger cassette beast to barely take it down. Later we return to Harbour Town and find out those are what are known in this world as archangels, beings of higher power, rarely seen, and so, with the knowledge, they may know a way to send us home. It becomes our mission to look for them all. Where Pocket Pair took the route of 3D open world, Byton Studios took the path of retro nostalgia, returning to the classic pixel art format, with the old school turn-based combat rarely seen outside of Pokémon and card games alike. But despite games like Final Fantasy moving away from this style of combat, Byton Studios has put their own twist to better separate them from others, because instead of your typical 1v1 situation, while you do get some in the early game, most battles take a duos-like format. So while you're exploring the wild, you may encounter a Bulletino, a fire type. And while you might be prepared for it with your astral type Waltergeist, It could be accompanied by a metal type like Gyaru, which helps make fights feel less predictable instead of them just being uncontrolled random encounters, while keeping the world feeling alive. Speaking of which, as you wander the wilds, you'll inevitably see these dark, shadowy figures with small variations in their encounters. Generally, these are known as rogue fusions. Higher level than the other beasts in the area, you'll have to defeat them as fusions, then as their individuals, which, while being a good source of XP and a more interesting battle, they also drop an item called a fusion shard, which you can use to redeem upgrades for your backpack. But there are more than just wild creature battles and rogue fusions, as you have 3 different types of battles you can participate in to help you and progress through the story. As we have the ranger battles, where you verse them and one of their trainees to prove yourself and receive a stamp. Collecting all 12 qualifies you as a ranger. But instead of the stereotypical their team being specified to one type, instead, their beasts are more fitting to their profession, such as Gladiola, the Mistress of Blades. She packs a team of Palagolin, Southpaw, and Cryoshear, 2 metal and 1 ice type. All of these have the theme of being able to cut like a blade. Then, the last type of battle is against the Archangels, which, while that title implies that they are servants of a higher power, they are themselves godlike entities, with their own unique abilities. They also come along with their own gimmicks. For example, one of the earlier bosses, slight spoiler warning, Morningstar, the Serpent God, while being a play on word, which happens a lot in this game, much to my amusement, is based on Lucifer, seen in the name. His design with angelic wings tied with the devil horns and serpent belt. Then also in combat, as a key attack, is Temptation, quite literally the apple of knowledge, which for the Archangel takes damage to produce. So for his fight, it's mostly about enduring and resisting the temptation to attack until he destroys himself. Which, I'll be honest, I can't say 100% if that's supposed to be the strategy, but considering its biblical connections and it was his own doing that caused his fall from grace, that's kinda too poetic for it not to be intentional. Either way, every Archangel has their own different gimmick you'll have to figure out to give yourself the best chance at beating these beasts, and is what makes these moments so much more fun, as even with the knowledge, it doesn't mean you can just cheese the fight. And while I didn't have the hardest time playing the game, that's probably because I didn't realize until the very last battle that the game has a difficulty and enemy intelligence setting, being able to make your enemies easy, or, as they so kindly like to put it, literally Skynet.
War against the machines.
So even if you were finding the game too easy or boring, you can always make it harder. And let's just put that back to normal. Perfect. Oh, wait, yeah. Yeah, that's better. And they'll never know. Furthermore, the combat chart is one of the best that I've seen out of a game like this. Instead of simply, this is super effective, or not very because water beats fire, like a game of rock, paper, scissors. Instead, while being more powerful attacks, they can add buffs or debuffs, depending on the type matchup, making good decisions more helpful and bad ones more punishing, such as in the case of fire attacks on plants, leaving a burn effect. But if they attack a water type, the water type is buffed with steam healing, mimicking the acts of precipitation. And then the third, possibly a benefit and possibly a negative, as a fire attack on a plastic monster causes it to mutate into a poison type because the harmful chemicals in plastics. That's not all though, as during battle you're limited to the moves you can use. Certain moves can't be learned by certain beasts, so you can't just have a one beast beats all situation. Furthermore, you can't just use your most powerful attack straight from the get-go. Instead, like in games such as Hearthstone, where you'll need mana points to summon a new or more powerful card, in Cassette Beasts, you'll have to slowly grow points to unlock your more powerful attacks, adding to the risk reward and resource management of your fights. In addition to this, these moves, also known as stickers, have different rarities, which can add effects to your moves and make it all the more important you look into different ways you can improve your movesets. But your beasts aren't the only thing you need to be aware of and take care of, as you and your companion are integral to the fight, as you have two separate health bars, one green for your beasts and one red for you and whoever you decide to take on your adventures. But if you or they lose that red health, then you'll lose the ability to fuse and be heavily disadvantaged for the rest of the fight, with only one person left. So using beasts with low health to tank an attack isn't a viable strategy in this game. Otherwise you'll be left on a 1 versus 2 or one person versus an archangel situation. But that doesn't mean every aspect of gameplay is without fault, as after a while, battles become stale, as the main ones still holding weight from both early game and late game are rogue fusions and archangel battles, while the captains don't. What could have helped this is if each captain, while some could have been simpler than others, it would have been better if the further you progressed, the captains had more tapes, because with a total of 3 tapes, 2 for the captain and 1 for the trainee, when you, the player, have 6, it makes battles trivial, and I felt fights were prolonged not because they were difficult, but because they were just tedious. And with things such as call for help allowing teams of 2 to summon a third, I was surprised to find that there are no 2 versus 3s or 3v3 battles, even if you exclude that ability. Does it deter me from playing? No, but if Byton Studios made a sequel or another game in a similar vein, it would be nice to have these sorts of mechanics further developed. Cassette Beasts Open World is a beautiful and mostly easy to traverse island, which combines 2D designs with a 3D world. Both smooth and pixelated animations. Everything blends seamlessly. How characters, both the players and beasts, interact within the 3D landscape, trees stretching and pulling instead of stagnant images, or a pixel animation, as that tends to grab people's attention and could make scenes overcrowded. Better reserved for where they are used for the living inhabitants, but more prominently in battles, with the nostalgic idle and fighting animations. Not only that, but it's also fitting to the story, as we have people from different worlds. It would make sense there would be a clash of styles, and how they would try to blend together.
Momentous.
Like how all 3D terrain is pixelated, despite not being flat on the screen. Separately, conversations with characters gain their own dedicated art, completely dissimilar to anything else in the game, give us a proper image of our pixelated friends, which I believe wouldn't have had the same charm if they had went with the continued theme of a 16-bit game. Which brings me to the characters as a whole. When it comes to the designs, everything does just look like they were shoved into the 80s clearance aisle and spat out into the oddly stylish and cozy characters.
Him, aren't you? You're the Goblin King. I want my brother back, please, if it's all the same.
What's said is said.
Firstly, there's Kaylee. Fittingly, she was actually born in the 80s, and yet she appears the most modern with her appearance. She's an Irish woman, and we know this from the flag in her room.
Huh?
Gay weddings.
Then there's Eugene. Eugene was born in 2076, about midway through the 21st century. His world seemingly went under a revolution that is implied to have abolished capitalism. Followed by Meredith, the goth, Felix, an artist and reformed weeb coming to terms and making peace with his edgy and cringy beginnings. Viola, Shakespearean Willowa, winners love winning. That's what that means, right? Barkley, the goodest boy. And Sunny, a recovering capitalist, landkeeper, and Eugene's I can fix her moment. These are the characters you can play alongside and build a relationship with, which not only gives battle bonuses, but also small sweet conversations between them and the player. Nothing meaningful, but an appreciated addition to signal the growth of their relationships. But then there are more with the captains like Wallace, Skip, Judas,
And now you, the humble employee of...
Cleo,
Smash.
with 7 other captains you'll find along the way, each with their own speciality, their outfits fitting their role perfectly. But enough about the humans. The game best shows off its in-depth designs with the different beasts you can record. There are over 130 unique beasts. Their designs, in my opinion, are amazing, mashing up culture, different time periods, and most importantly, puns. With beasts such as Dominoth, a moth-like beast wearing a domino mask, most commonly used by superhero sidekicks like the Robins of the Bat family, which it can later evolve or remaster into 2 paths, either going down the more dark-like path as a lightning type with Wingloom, a Cape Crusader inspired design. It still carries the Moth design as it then remasters once more into Mothmanic, which has a few ways you can dissect it. With Mothman, the Western 1960s folklore creature of a anthropomorphic moth. It stands like a man, but with big moth wings, and most recognizably from its big red eyes. Then you could read it as Mothman, like the Western superheroes. And then there's Mothmanic, simply a manic moth. Less subtleties in that one. But then there's the other remaster, one that follows the wind route, a bug warrior called Tokusect, going the opposite direction with Japanese superheroes like Kamen Rider, which popularized the idea of an insect superhero. And then there are plenty more of these cultural inspired characters, such as Bin Vader being a Dalek from Doctor Who, Kana Viper remastering into one of 3 snake creatures of Mythos, or Bush Eye. Yeah, it's just a bush with eyes. But with Cassette Beasts, everything is recognizable and stands out, unlike the recent additions to the Pokémon series, a franchise who has been doing it far longer and with a much larger team and budget. Like, who the hell is Atticus? And what is a Reverum? This isn't Skylander Superchargers, is it? All the while, Cassette Beasts has a completely original cast of characters and beasts that can't be compared to any other game in the same field. The music. I reckon by this point you've probably noticed the soundtracks in this video have all been taken from the game itself. All are composed by Joel Baylis, with the vocals by Shelby Harvey. The songs sound like they were remastered from an 8-bit game, modernized but still keeping that video game digital flair, giving fans of the genre a sense of nostalgia, and yet they're all original to the game, perfectly capturing that same feeling you would have had booting up your Game Boy or DS back in the day. Also, I really enjoy the atmosphere the music brings to the game. The visuals complement the music and the game style. It's very soothing when just traveling around. Meanwhile, if you were to enter a battle, the music would become more tense and epic in nature. Or if you were to enter a room that was eerie, there would be music that would make you feel uneasy, making it all very carefully curated for every aspect of the game as you experience it, instead of just being random filler noise. Which, I know most games do this, but it's still something worth praise, as the music is just that iconic to me. Oftentimes I just have the home screen loaded up, listening to the music, forgetting I had a game to play. And the opening music isn't even my favorite. I've tried to stay away from this particular word most of the video, otherwise I thought it'd be the only thing I'd talk about. But Cassette Beasts is a cozy game. From its casual gameplay, which could get difficult at times, a world that lets you explore it however you please, characters and companions which support you, a style of music that is both sides of a coin, retro and modern, but also warm and suspenseful, and its story, both light-hearted, but also carrying its stakes. But just like in the story, minus a few archangels, It's a game that takes you back in time to a style of game which is rarely seen anymore, or has lost the essence of what made it so fun to play and experience. But Byton Studios captured that. The team at Byton Studios made a game which, in my opinion, is deserving of much more recognition than it's received. But Mayday, it's K, and...
Pass. 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 Would this make me a furry if I said smash? Smash.